Hey folks, Chris Vandeviver here from WLPR and I want to welcome you to Lesson 4 of our EQ Mini-Course. Now we've come a long way in terms of strategy and workflow for EQing a full mix. Quick recap, in Lesson 1, you learned that you need to provide yourself a goalpost to work towards when it comes to EQ and tone. It's not enough to blindly walk in and just start throwing EQ all over everything. So we use the logic match EQ and a couple references to find that goalpost. In Lesson 2, you learn that there's low-level sound and noise that is taking away from the space and clarity of your tracks. You might not be able to hear that low-level sound, but it's there. So we use the channel EQ and its high-pass filters to remove that. And in Lesson 3, we used broad stroke EQ to just generally shape our mix to get us closer to that goalpost faster. Instead of thinking in terms of 20 hertz to 20K, we just thought in 3 bands, low, mid, and high. That's it. And we used a free third-party plugin to help us get there. In today's lesson, we're going to get more surgical with the EQ. But before we do that, I went ahead after video 3 and I did more broad stroke EQing on my own. I didn't use any other EQ other than the slick EQ that I recommended. But I went through and I adjusted some things, and even on some of the tracks that I worked on in video 3, I did a little more adjusting, and that's fine. Mixing is a messy process. It's like sculpting a statue. You know, you're not going to walk up to a stone and start chiseling out an eye or a nose. You're just going to start with the general shape of a human body. And once you got that, maybe you start working towards the legs or an arm or a torso. And then eventually you'll finally get to the eyes and the nose. But it takes a lot of, going through round by round, chiseling more, generally shaping, and then fine tuning it as you go. It's the same thing with mixing. So you don't have to feel bad if you had to hit that kick or that vocal 2, 3, or 4 times. The mix will reveal itself with each pass, especially when you're adding compression and other things. But at least now you have a set of steps, a strategy for approaching EQ. So let's just take a listen to what I've done. After that, we'll listen to the mix without the plugins to hear where we started, and then we'll hear it with the plugins again to hear how much it's changed, just with general broad strokes. Let's take a listen. Okay, so let's select all the tracks, and we don't need to select any of these. We're going to listen to the mix, and then I'm going to bypass it while we're listening to hear the difference. So it's pretty dramatic, and it's just general shaping, low, mid, high. To my ears, the vocals have more room to occupy. It's less muddy. The high end is a little more airy. The low end, girthier. Just feels better to me. And I've kind of conquered what I like to call mid-mountain, at least to some extent. Most instruments live in the mid-range. And so there's a lot of people talking all at the same time in the same frequency range. So we kind of spread the instruments out more towards the low and the high end. So now let's get more surgical. So as you continue your mix, broad stroke EQing, compression, other things, certain sounds are going to reveal themselves to you. It might be something about an instrument that you want to accentuate. Like you like that, you want to bring it out more. And there are certain things that you want to remove. Just like there's a frequency that just sounds super ugly and you got to get rid of it. And that's where the channel EQ just really prospers. The channel EQ is brilliant because you can get very narrow bands with it. Very narrow. I mean, that's like very tiny. So if there's a very particular frequency that you want to remove, it's so simple to get rid of. Or if there's something that you want to accentuate, we wouldn't necessarily go with this narrow. We go a little broader, but you can get very fine-tuned about what you want to accentuate. So the piano track I found as I continue mixing, there's a frequency in there that just drives me bonkers. It doesn't sound good. Let's see if you can hear it. I'm going to solo the piano just for this case. Take a listen. So there's a ringing in there, probably somewhere in this region that it's no good. It doesn't sound good. It's just hanging around way too long. It's kind of zingy. So let's see if I can try and find it. I'm going to make a narrow band. I'm going to boost it. I'm going to try to locate it. There it is. Let's hear that against the drums so we have a better idea in context what's going on. To me, the piano feels way smoother now. Now, I want to be able to tell you that there's a hard, fast rule for finding these frequencies, but in fact, there's not. It's just practice. It's just listening and becoming familiar with tone and EQ. There are some great apps for the iPhone and Android where you can test your listening against certain frequencies, instruments, like certain things are being boosted or cut, and then you guess which frequency it is. I highly suggest doing that. I mean, your hearing and your ability to identify EQ will change dramatically in like 2 weeks. I remember downloading one of these apps and just sitting at the kitchen table for breakfast with my head on the table, earbuds in, and just listening, just eyes closed and guessing. And my hearing dramatically improved for identifying frequencies. So I can't suggest that enough. Let's do another example here. I have the kick drum. Let's remove the piano. And there's something about it that I couldn't accomplish with this Tokyo Dawn Lab Slick EQ. I mean, I did the best I could, but it just wasn't doing enough for me. Let's check it out. So there is a frequency down towards the lower end that's just a little too woofy. And I tried to eliminate it with the mid band here, around 270 hertz, 9 decibels I cut out. But still, I hear a trail of that low end frequency just still hanging around too long. I don't like it. Let's hear it without this mid band. Can you hear it? It's down there. It's like I almost got it, but it just hangs around for too long. It's too woofy. So instead of using the Slick EQ, let's try the channel EQ where I can get it a little more fine-tuned. Check it out. Now let's compare the channel EQ against the slick EQ. I still hear it trailing, but the kick drum sounds a little less nasally to me now. There's kind of like a nasally feature to it that I don't like it. And I much prefer the channel EQ for reducing that frequency because I was able to be more specific about how I wanted to remove it. So again, I wish there was a hard, fast rule, but the hard, fast rule is the channel EQ is fantastic for getting surgical with your EQs in terms of boosts and cuts. So in lesson 5, our final lesson, we're going to sweeten up this mix in a very pleasing way. Thanks so much.